Hey, what's going on, everybody? Max here with BB, and today for 10 Minutes Max, we're going to be doing an update on Bitcoin, ETH, and altcoins, going over where we are now that we are coming into the last Monday of October, the first month of Q4. I think 2 videos ago, I believe I went through almost every historical bull market example of some of the shenanigans or scammery that occurs with the Q4 rollover, and there's some stuff that I think you really need to keep your eyes out looking for. Okay, so let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. So we're going to just start with some really quick updates, and then we'll get into some more of the specifics. Okay, so something that I've been telling everybody to do is, every calendar rollovers. Every calendar rollover is important, but not all of them are equal. I think the Q4 open is the most important. Again, if you go back and you look at, I think 2 weeks ago, I dropped a 10-minute max video 2 Mondays ago. And I went over some of the historical examples. I might decide to quickly show my favorite one again. But basically what we saw this Q4 has been no different in terms of like the shenanigans for the opening. So this is the Q4 opening tick right here. All right. I don't know. We'll just make it, we'll make it blue. Okay. Q4 open, right? October 1st hits. What happens? They scam pump the market aggressively. October is very much so here. Let's go. We're all going to be rich. Okay. Then they dump it straight down, right? I'm actually going to just kind of draw it like this with us, above and below the open, right? I know we kind of started dumping quick from here, but scam pump into a very aggressive and historic scam dump. And of course, I don't need to remind you guys of this. This scam dump here, after they pumped you right off of the Q4 open with basically no price action below besides like a 10-point wick, this was notionally speaking, the worst altcoin flush that we've had since COVID. Okay, now granted, the market is arguably bigger, so you could argue that, but still, nonetheless, I mean, something like Atom went to zero. We covered that a couple weeks ago as well. But we are now back above that Q4 open, which is the point of what I'm trying to show you guys here. We are back above the Q4 open after pumping off the open and then scam dumping and rugging it down to below the open. Where have we seen this before? I gave like half a dozen examples. I'm going to show you my favorite one again. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't want to spend, 10 minutes doing it, and you can watch the last video. But this is probably my favorite one right here. This is the best scam in terms of a Q4 open that I've ever seen. So this right here was the Q4 open in 2023. Okay. So what they did here, and I'll add our little blue dot as well, just so it's the same. October 1 hits, they scam pump you off the open, and then they dump you below the open. And anybody that shorted or sold below the Q4 2023 open got their face ripped off. And this one was it is beautifully orchestrated, right? We always kind of joke, but also there's some truth to it. We talk quite a bit on this channel of being one with the scam, right? Being one with the scam. How can they hurt me the most, right? How can they hurt me the most? They get you excited. They scam pump you off the open. And again, Q4 is seasonally the best time to be invested in risk assets, specifically crypto. They scam pump you off the open. They dump you below the open. They get you to sell or short below the open, looking like they're going to break you down. We even had it, at this point, there was a CME gap down here at like 21K, and it looked pretty brutal, right? You had, some equal lows here on some of the spot charts. It just looked so bad, and then they just ripped your face off, right? So I'm not going to go through all of them. I think, one example really is fine if you want to see all of them. I kind of did a little back test study, and it was the last 10-minute max video on our YouTube. It was 2 weeks ago. But we are now successfully back above that Q4 open, which is incredibly significant because bulls now have an opportunity here. They have an opportunity here where early longs got wiped. Cycle top callers shorting down here, potentially vulnerable. You sold or shorted below this Q4 open. You are now thinking to yourself, uh-oh, this might be one of those ultimate calendar rollover scams. And we know what typically happens in Q4. It's seasonally, usually very, very bullish. And we know that when a trap gets set, it's specifically one of this magnitude where you had such a large liquidation event, things can get pretty aggressive to the opposing side if there is not follow through, right? And I think that's maybe what we are going to see. I guess time will tell. Let's take a look at ETH, right? Let's take a look at ETH. Where is the Q4 open? Q4 open is right here. Add this on there, Q4 open. All right, and ETH, somewhat similar to what Bitcoin is doing. Guys, look at this. Scam pump you right off the open. Scam dump you, flush and wreck everybody. Altcoins in shambles. Spot ETH in shambles. It dumped from 47.50 down here on Binance to 3,400. I mean, it was just a horrific event. All for us to just later in the month get back above the Q4 open. Now, everybody that sold or shorted down here, expecting it to actually break down, has a decision to make. Because you can go back and look at what has happened in the past, right? I mean, we can even use this as another example. We just talked about this one with Bitcoin. This is my favorite bullish Q4 example here. Look at this one. October 1st. It's right here. I mean, look at this trap that was set, for Ethereum back in 2023. So this is the one we just did on Bitcoin, but now we're looking at it on ETH. They scam pump you just enough off the open, and then they send it down. It looks like this thing is cooked. I mean, I don't even remember at this time, you had this whole thing going on with ETH where you had a major diagonal trend line breakdown, and this was a valid trend, right? And then obviously a confirmed trend by the breakdown and the magnitude of it. I mean, there was suspicions, and I'll admit I was even guilty of this, looking at some of these equal lows being like, oh, there's a lot of lows, like prominent lows that could get hit here, and this thing looks horrible, right? Horrible. So they drop you down into this position of looking incredibly vulnerable. They convince you to short or sell or whatever down here below the Q4 open, and look at what happened. Look at what happened. Like, now this is technically into Q1, but this was January 12th. So in a matter of from the low, I don't know where my drawings just went. Something's going on. From this low, so in 3 months, after setting the most beautiful Q4 open scam of all time, 92 days later, 3 months later from when the low was set, ETH went from 1,500 to 2,700 in 3 months, right? And then, of course, you extend it even further into, the end of Q1, right? This was March 12th, right? So double that up now. 150 days. I mean, ETH went from 1,500 to 4,000, in like 2 fiscal quarters, right? So again, we don't need to keep going through every possible example here, but it's pertinent to recognize what can happen when you set a trap like that and you lose the Q4 open after scam pumping up, getting everyone excited and offsides a little bit too early, and then you reclaim that Q4 open. So there is still work to be done, let me be clear. However, we have seen this before, and I want this video to serve as, you know what? If I got shaken out down here, it might warrant me reconsidering and just really focusing in on this Q4 open and saying, you know what? If we are still above it, there might in fact be good reason to be very bullish, because that is potentially a very, very, powerful trap, right? And it's also one that they've used time and time and time again. And that's why I made my video a couple weeks ago talking about how if we get back above that Q4 open, there's going to be a lot of people that are not ready for what comes next. And that's usually the fun part. I always say this to people. It's always the darkest before the fun part. Okay? It is always the darkest before the fun part. All right. Let's talk about, and actually one thing I want to spend just a second longer talking about ETH here, okay? So when I look at ETH here, guys, it's pretty straightforward. All right, it's pretty straightforward. When I look at ETH here, the levels couldn't be much more clear. I'm going to remove some of this just for the time being. If you just look at this chart and you say, you know what, I'm going to stay off of the lower time frames. I refuse to let myself get shaken out. These two lines right here are kind of everything that you need. I'll shade them in right here just so they're impossible to miss. These two lines right here, this is the most important level on the Ethereum chart. 1, 2, deviation, 3, 4, 5, kind of 6. 6 high time frame, weekly time frame rejections from this level. You pop up above it. You sweep the previous cycle all-time high. Textbook, right? Absolutely textbook. And then little rejection. Let's see, previous all-time high. And then you fire back in to this high time frame SR level. And now you're back above the Q4 open. In theory, this is where Ethereum should launch. Okay? There is no reason to go back down much lower than here if we are going to be bullish. This should be used as a pivot point to send ETH ripping into price discovery. Okay? Absolutely ripping into price discovery. So when I look at this chart here, I'll zoom in a little bit. Say, all right, we've got our previous all-time high up here. We've got our Q4 open right here. We've got our green level, which is the most important weekly level on the entire chart. You've also got something kind of brewing like this. You know, you could probably prospect this as, you know, a diagonal trend, this being a deviation. Certainly predatory fake breakout coming off of the Q4 open. I think if you see this start to break higher here, you know, ETH above 4380, 4400, you can probably kiss it goodbye. And I think there's some more confluence when you pull up something like ETHBTC. I think I initially made this in a prior 10-minute max video. Looks like it's kind of playing out. There's some bullish pattern going on for ETHBTC as well. Okay. You've got this little, you know, supply region right here we're stuck at, but you've more or less broken out of this diagonal. You dipped into high time frame demand. You've got a bullish compression here. Once you flip this level, the market's going to go risk on, because I'll tell you what, ETHBTC moving up doesn't happen when the market is bearish. ETHBTC moving up happens when the market is bullish. All right. So when I look at this, I say to myself, this looks like a pretty bullish setup here. You could maybe consider this like a, you know, inverse head and shoulders, diagonal compression. You could even just kind of view it like, you know, this is some like bottoming range, you know, whatever. There's a 1,000 different ways to categorize the pattern. The point is, it looks very accumulative to me. Okay. This very much so looks like it's going to break higher. And if it does, the whole market should start moving higher. Okay. Now, I also want to talk about the Bitcoin gold pair. All right. Now, the Bitcoin gold pair is one of the more important charts. Okay. It is absolutely, without question, one of the more important charts out there. And we're going to go through and I'll explain, you know, all the USD pair examples as to why. But this is how it looks on the higher time frame. All right. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. So you've been in this range since last cycle's top, you know, basically April of 2021. And, you kind of deviated the high, then you went down to the low. You can also put it in log mode, and, I think your mid-range in log mode is a little bit cleaner. It works in linear and log. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Different levels, but same picture. Now, what we were talking about, I think either on Market Checker in the last 10-minute max, is this looks bad, right? Let me find a good time frame. This looked bad here, right? This looked heavy. You kind of popped up. You kind of like potentially printing like a lower high. And I said to everybody, look, similarly to the ETH BTC pair, we just went over it. Okay. I didn't give every example. Furthermore, I didn't give any examples. I just told it to you, but it is the truth. ETH BTC doesn't move up when the market's bearish. ETH BTC moves up when things are generally bullish. Okay. It's a risk on barometer. Okay. It's a risk on oscillator. The same goes for Bitcoin Gold. All right, and I will give some more examples of this one. I put out a tweet about it earlier, so maybe you saw it, but we'll do it again together. Okay. Bitcoin doesn't move up if Bitcoin Gold is moving down. And you could argue with me, well, the chicken or the egg, like which one comes first, Well, the truth is, this cycle so far, for at least 2 years now, Bitcoin and gold really haven't moved together. They've taken turns trading back and forth. Gold rallies, Bitcoin pauses. Bitcoin rallies, gold pauses, right? And that's what this chart is. It kind of looks like Bitcoin, but like a warped version of Bitcoin. But if you look at it, you can see, the Bitcoin chart within this pair chart, okay? So what we've done here now is we took out this low, we dipped into high time frame demand, and we're getting a huge reaction out of here. Okay, we're getting a huge reaction. That's potentially a really good sign. It could mean you're going to get something like this and potentially going to see this move into price discovery. It hasn't happened yet, right? You might have to wait a little bit longer, but it is a good sign, right? It is a very good sign so far to see this kind of reaction. Now, I want to go over here and we'll mark this up together, okay? I don't even need USD. Gold. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to look at gold up top, and we're going to look at Bitcoin down below for more or less the duration of this cycle. All right. Oops. We'll put Bitcoin candles on. The border's off. We'll make it orange for Bitcoin. And we'll make this gold for the gold chart. All right, great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mark this up just a little bit together, okay? So, and actually let me go to the daily time frame just so we can get a little bit more granular with it. We've been doing this little song and dance kind of all cycle. Okay, so let's start with this big prolonged accumulation that we saw here. Okay, so Bitcoin was basically topped and in a horrible like 8-month range right here. Okay, Bitcoin was stuck in mud. And during that time, look at my crosshairs and I'll move them up just so you know it's the exact same amount of time. And during that time, gold was ripping. Right? Gold was performing very, very well. I'll zoom in just so you can see it. Gold was performing very well, and Bitcoin was destroying everybody, right? Gold up, Bitcoin destroying everybody. Not good. And then gold decides to pause briefly. And while gold pauses and doesn't go up to make a new or I guess I should maybe say until gold went on to make a new all-time high after that, or actually, was this the all-time high? I don't know. New cyclical high. As soon as gold paused and started bleeding, then from that point forward, the exact date was right here, Bitcoin starts ripping. Bitcoin starts ripping. So you're seeing perfectly in this example, like gold strong, Bitcoin weak. Gold weak, Bitcoin strong. What happens next? Gold starts ripping again. Has kind of like a local blow off top type of thing going on right here. Oops, I had that right. My fault. green. And then as soon as that starts happening, what happens to Bitcoin? Bitcoin's weak again, right? So you're seeing this little song and dance that keeps playing out here. Let's look again. Then gold becomes weak. And while gold is weak, Bitcoin steals the show back. Just stop it right here when it kind of topped out. Perfect. And then, as of recently, gold has been incredibly strong. What's Bitcoin been doing? Nothing fun. Nothing constructive, right? So when you look at these together, and I'll move them up onto the same pane, just so you can really get a good view at them. Might have to put this in the log just so we can get them close. You can see these phases, right? You can see these phases very clearly. Gold up top, Bitcoin down below. I'll extend them so like they're literally touching each other. Perfect. Perfect. And perfect. Okay, and that's where gold topped. So you can see very clearly here that they've actually been moving opposite of each other. Bitcoin wrecked, gold thriving. Gold pulling back, Bitcoin pumping. Gold pumping, Bitcoin wrecked. Gold moving sideways / down, Bitcoin pumping hard. Gold going parabolic, everybody gets destroyed with Bitcoin again, right? So now that it looks like gold has kind of cooled off, at least temporarily here, okay? This is a pretty decent drop. If gold does another one of these, right, like cool off periods, it doesn't even need to nuke or anything like that. But if it does another one of these, then I think it makes sense, given what we've seen this cycle, to prospect a big catch-up trade with Bitcoin. I do. I very much so do. Where we might see gold, kind of bleed, move sideways, do something like this, doesn't matter. And you might see Bitcoin just reprice straight up in a straight line. And I will say also, like, the magnitude of the gold move, I think, is potentially revealing for Bitcoin to put in one of its larger moves yet. I think that the magnitude of the gold move, given that these charts do this little dance, and the better gold does, typically it seems like so far this cycle, the better Bitcoin does on the comeback after, it's Bitcoin's turn. I think there's a pretty compelling case to be made for that Bitcoin gold rotation. So you're looking here at the USD pairs, right? You're looking at gold USD and Bitcoin USD. You can see that they don't rally together. Gold will rally. Then when it pauses, Bitcoin goes. That's what I'm showing you. And then we'll go back and we'll look at the Bitcoin gold pair. So we just did that. Now let's look at the Bitcoin gold pair. It's basically reaccumulating right under. It's basically reaccumulating right under the previous all-time high. It's been in a 4-year range. Gold is basically just kind of doing a blow off top, but looks like it's cooling off right now. And you're coming out of this weekly time frame low that was taken into demand, with gold USD cooling off and Bitcoin reclaiming the Q4 open. There's certainly something shaping up here, right? Like there's something brewing here. And it doesn't seem bearish to me. We know that Q4 is typically very solid. We know that we often get these, early quarter shakeouts. And when you dive in under the surface and you understand what's been going on with gold, and you look at how they've been trading, Bitcoin sort of being the de facto digital gold, as they like to call it. You look at the pair chart, then you look at the USD charts, and you say, you know what, all roads kind of point towards a really bullish Q4 for Bitcoin and a huge catch up on this pair trade. So it's very interesting, right? It's very interesting to see all this kind coming to a head here, and then we've talked about this before as well. I don't need to go too much into detail here, but this is IWM. This is US small caps, right? I mean, talk about like breaking away into, price discovery after reaccumulation. This range goes all the way back to 2021, right? And when when US small caps finally, start ripping in price discovery, what typically happens to crypto? Like here, let's look at total. US small caps up top, total crypto market cap down below. Last cycle, when US small caps went into price discovery right here, this is what happened to total. This is what happened to total. And we are now just seeing US small caps getting into price discovery this month. Like, could we be looking at a chart that's about to do this? You know what I mean? Similar to last cycle. It's certainly possible. Like, you just look at the whole picture. Bitcoin, commodities, US, equities just like ripping every single day. Look at the Nasdaq. I mean, look at the Nasdaq. This thing is just it just gapped up again today. Look at this thing. I mean, stocks are in a raging melt up right now. This is where it's at. Since the bottom, after we nuked in Q1, stocks are up 56%. I mean, it's like it is eventually crypto's turn. It is eventually crypto's turn. So I think given how things are trading right now, it may very well be crypto's turn sooner rather than later. I do. And speaking of, the Nasdaq, we can go over here and we can look at a pair chart. Here's the Bitcoin Nasdaq pair. So we were just talking about, gold and Bitcoin and that relative pair. This is Bitcoin against the Nasdaq. It's in a bit of a correction here. But if you look at this chart, oops, let's pull this up here. This is the most important level on this chart, right? It's basically where you've had all your high time frame tops, and then, see this top, this one, then you flipped it, right? This could very well just be reaccumulating before we ultimately move higher, right? So this is the Bitcoin Nasdaq pair on top of the previous cycle all-time high, right? I think watch this one closely as well. I don't have like a perfect local setup for it, but to me, it feels like as long as you're above this green box here, this is going to be your, crypto versus stocks pair. And one thing we could even do this instead. We could look at total, just so we include everything, not just Bitcoin. And when I look at this one, I say we've been in 5-day. We've been in just like a giant range, for years. Giant range for, this is total versus the Nasdaq, right? This is kind of like US small caps. It's just been moving sideways for, for years. And I look at this and I say, well, it's not the most beautiful looking chart. Like, it kind of looks like choppy and awkward. But I look at this and I say, it doesn't need to like break down here. Like, stocks are ripping. We might just see this thing start to cook soon. It might just kind of break above these highs and just start going, And this has been like a range within a range where, stocks crypto versus stocks have just kind of been stuck, right here, like in this range within like the upper portion of your high time frame range, for months. I mean, literally like a year. This is, we topped here in, November, December of last year. So this to me feels like it's, becoming accumulative right now. Like it's getting ready to break higher. So I look at this and I say stocks are ripping, gold is ripping. We're about to get, another rate cut here this week. Everything is totally fine. It feels like crypto's a beach ball underwater. We just went over the gold example and how important that is in terms of like what's going to be rallying, and they don't rally together. They kind of trade off. So it'll be very interesting. Like, I think this may be the fun part, Q4 into Q1. It has been a long cycle, but it is always darkest before the fun part. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Hit that like button before you go. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and we will see you next week for another 10-minute max. Everybody stay safe and take care.